New York City glimmered at night like a jewel that never slept. Glass towers pierced the sky, neon lights danced across the avenues, and in the heart of Manhattan stood a penthouse so high it seemed to look down on the entire city. Inside that fortress of marble floors and chandeliers lived William Carter, a man whose name alone carried weight. Billionaire, hotel tycoon, ruthless in business, cold in demeanor, and utterly untouchable. To most of the world, he was a figure carved out of stone, powerful, feared, respected. But in the silence of his penthouse, there was someone else, someone most would never notice. She moved like a shadow between the rooms, leaving no trace but the faint scent of bleach and the quiet order she restored each day. Her name was Maya Johnson, a young black woman in her 20s who carried herself with a kind of invisible dignity. Maya's life inside the penthouse was routine and predictable. She rose early, always arrived before sunrise, and disappeared before dark. She hardly spoke. When she did, her voice was low, respectful, never demanding. Her uniform was plain, and she rotated the same faded dresses whenever she was off duty. To the wealthy guests and William's inner circle, she was practically furniture there but unseen, necessary but unacknowledged. William never asked where she came from, nor what she did once she left his home each evening. Why would he? She was the help, a maid paid to keep his empire spotless, to clear away the crumbs of his banquets and fold the towels he never used. He had entire boards of directors and legal teams at his fingertips. Why would he ever stop to look twice at a quiet maid with worn-out shoes? And yet, there was something peculiar. Every evening at precisely 5:45 p.m., Maya left carrying two old nylon bags. One sagged heavily as though stuffed with food. The other bulged with papers, worn folders, sometimes notebooks peeking out from the top. She never explained, and William never asked. Until one golden evening, curiosity tightened its grip around him. He was coming down the grand staircase when he spotted her at the door, adjusting the straps of her bags. She stiffened when she noticed him watching, leaving early again. His voice was flat, detached. "Yes, sir. I've finished everything for the day. What's inside the bags?" She hesitated. Her eyes flicked downward, not quite meeting his. "Just some food. And some documents. It's personal, sir." William frowned. For a man who ran empires, who demanded transparency from executives and audited entire corporations at a whim, her secrecy gnawed at him. Yet she offered no excuses, no explanations, just a polite nod before stepping out of the penthouse and vanishing into the streets below. That night, William Carter sat alone in his study, the city glowing beneath his glass windows. He should have been reviewing contracts worth millions, preparing for a board meeting, or plotting his next acquisition. But he wasn't. His mind kept circling back to the girl with the bags. What kind of maid carried legal-looking documents every night? Why did she never ask for help, even when her shoes were nearly splitting at the seams? Why did she insist on vanishing into the city like a ghost? The moment the sun dipped behind the skyscrapers, her employee file told him nothing. Clean record, hired through an agency. No education history, no emergency contacts. It was as though she'd been dropped into his world without roots, without story. Too clean, too simple. And William Carter knew better than anyone. Nothing was ever that simple. For the first time in years, sleep eluded him. By midnight, he was pacing his study, jaw tight, the question burning hotter in his chest. Who is this woman I let sweep my floors, but never truly saw? William Carter was not the kind of man who followed people. People followed him, subordinates, rivals, journalists desperate for his next move. But by the next evening, as the sun sank low and the city's pulse quickened, William sat behind the wheel of his sleek black SUV. No driver, no entourage, just him, a plain baseball cap pulled low over his brow, dark sunglasses shielding his gaze. For once, the hunter became the watcher, and tonight, he would follow Maya Johnson. At 5:55 p.m., she appeared, just as predictable as the ticking of a clock. Same modest dress, same steady walk, same two bags gripped tightly at her sides. She didn't hail a cab or call a car service. She walked, her sandals slapped against the pavement as she slipped into the crowd, weaving through vendors shouting about roasted corn, dodging the roar of bikers, passing stores lit with garish signs. She didn't look left or right, didn't pause to chat, didn't break her stride. And William followed. His tinted SUV crawled through the chaos of Harlem streets, shadows swallowing him as he kept his distance. He felt the unease of being on unfamiliar ground. It had been years since he'd driven through these neighborhoods, where buildings crumbled and children played in alleyways, where every face looked worn from struggle. Finally, Maya boarded a battered yellow bus with chipped paint and a shouting conductor. William trailed silently, weaving his luxury vehicle through traffic. The bus rumbled into a part of town William hadn't seen since his youth, a place he had long forgotten existed. The bus screeched to a stop. Maya stepped down, walked briskly past cracked sidewalks and graffiti-marked walls, and slipped through a rusted iron gate. Above it hung a faded sign, House of Second Chances, free classes, free meals, free hope. William's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. What was this place? Through the cracked window of the community center, he leaned forward. What he saw froze him where he sat. Inside, rows of adults, black men in dusty work boots, women in aprons, elderly faces lined with hardship sat clutching notebooks like treasures. At the front of the room, chalk dust on her hands, stood Maya. Not the maid he thought he knew, not the silent shadow who cleaned his mansion, but a teacher. Her voice was clear, her smile radiant, her patience infinite. She scrawled large words across the board, hospital forms, how to fill them out. She bent low to guide an elderly man's hand across the page, encouraging him as though his trembling letters were masterpieces. When he finally managed to sign his name, his face broke into a childlike grin. The class erupted in claps, and William Carter, billionaire, untouchable, feared, felt something crack inside his chest. This wasn't just a maid. This was someone extraordinary, someone he had never truly seen until now. The following evening, New York's sky bled into dusk, streaked with amber and violet. For most, it was just another Friday, but for William Carter, it was the beginning of something he hadn't done in years. Waiting in the underground garage of his high-rise, he sat behind the wheel of his sleek black SUV. No chauffeur, no assistant. A simple baseball cap shadowed his face, dark sunglasses masking the sharpness in his eyes. The man who was always followed, always chased for deals and headlines, was now the one lying in wait. At exactly 5:55 p.m., the elevator doors slid open and out stepped Maya Johnson. Same faded dress, same worn shoes, same bags clutched tightly to her chest. She didn't glance around, didn't notice the billionaire's eyes watching her from behind tinted glass. She walked out the gates with the steady rhythm of someone who knew her route by heart. William's SUV rolled forward, slipping into the evening traffic. The streets grew busier as Maya moved further uptown. Vendors called out about roasted peanuts, kids played with jump ropes on cracked sidewalks, and buskers played saxophones that wailed through the evening air. Maya didn't flinch. She walked with a straight back, her face calm, her eyes fixed ahead, as though none of it touched her. Finally, she stopped at a bus stop, boarded a dented yellow bus with peeling paint. Its conductor clung to the side, yelling at passengers to squeeze in tighter. William hesitated. Him on a bus? Impossible. Instead, his SUV shadowed it from behind, weaving through traffic like a silent predator. His empire had taught him to command boardrooms, not follow broken-down buses into neighborhoods the city had long abandoned. And yet, here he was. The bus jolted through Harlem streets, then deeper into a part of town William hadn't visited in decades. The glass towers and boutiques gave way to graffiti-streaked walls, buildings sagging under years of neglect, and children chasing each other barefoot near potholes filled with rainwater. This was not his New York. The bus hissed to a stop. Maya stepped down, adjusted her bags, and walked briskly past rows of crumbling tenements. William slowed his SUV, careful to keep a distance. His stomach tightened with a feeling he rarely knew, unease. She finally slipped through a rusted gate into a building with a faded wooden sign. The paint was chipped, the letters barely legible, but William read them: House of Second Chances, free literacy and meals. His eyebrows furrowed. Literacy, meals? What did a maid with 2 old dresses have to do with a place like this? Curiosity dragged him closer. He parked, slipped out of the car, and moved quietly toward a cracked window. The sight inside froze him. A dimly lit hall. Wooden benches lined up, filled with faces, black men in work boots caked with dust. Women in aprons holding notebooks like lifelines, elders hunched with age, yet wide-eyed with hope. They weren't there for food. They were there for knowledge. And at the front of the room stood Maya. Not the silent maid who kept her head down. Not the girl whose voice barely rose above a whisper in his penthouse. Here. She was radiant, confident, alive. Chalk dust smeared her fingers as she wrote in bold letters on the board, "Today's lesson." Filling hospital forms, her voice carried warmth and authority. She bent over to help an elderly man pronounce pharmacy, repeating it gently until he smiled like a child. She guided a young mother's hand across a form, whispering encouragements until the woman's eyes lit with pride. William's chest tightened. He had never seen her smile like this, not once. Not while sweeping his polished floors, not while clearing his untouched plates. That smile didn't belong to his mansion. It belonged here, in this fragile sanctuary. Then came the final blow. At the end of class, Maya opened one of the nylon bags she had carried from his penthouse. Inside were loaves of bread, packets of water, and fruit. With quiet care, she distributed them first to the elders, then to the mothers, and finally to the men. A woman hugged her, whispering, "God bless you, Maya." William swallowed hard. In his mansion, untouched food rotted in pantries. His closets overflowed with designer clothes he had never worn. He had a gym he never stepped into, rooms he never visited. And outside his gates, this young black woman was giving away the little she had. Without cameras, without applause, without anyone to bear witness except him. Hidden in the shadows, for the first time in years, the billionaire who owned everything felt small. That night, William didn't sleep. The image of Maya at the blackboard, laughter in her eyes, her arms stretched wide to embrace her students, burned in his mind. He had followed her out of suspicion, expecting betrayal. Instead, he had stumbled upon something purer than anything money could buy. And though he didn't know it yet, his life would never be the same. The following evenings blurred together. But William Carter found himself trapped in a new routine, one he had never imagined for himself. By day, he was the billionaire tycoon, cold as granite in boardrooms, feared by rivals, and obeyed by employees who wouldn't dare question him. But as soon as the clock crept toward 5:30 p.m., his pulse betrayed him. His eyes wandered to the penthouse door, waiting for the quiet click of Maya's sandals as she slipped out into the city. And every night, he followed. He no longer cared if it was reckless for a man of his status to drive alone into neighborhoods the press labeled unsafe. He didn't care if his security detail would panic if they found out. William Carter had faced hostile takeovers and courtroom battles, yet nothing unnerved him like the sight of this young woman, walking steadily toward her hidden second life, inside the house of second chances. William became her silent witness. Through cracked glass and half-open doors, he watched the transformation that shook him to his core. The Maya who scrubbed his marble floors was a shadow, eyes down, back bent, invisible. But the Maya who stood before that battered chalkboard, she was fire. She was light. Her voice carried strength. She commanded attention not with wealth or authority, but with patience and warmth. She guided trembling hands across pages, teaching letters as if each was a gift. "Start here," she would say gently, tracing a shaky P with an older man until his grin broke wide. "Pharmacy," she repeated, and the class echoed her like children tasting words for the first time. William leaned closer one night, his breath fogging the glass as he stared. He saw her crouch beside a young mother, showing her how to write her child's name. The woman's lips quivered as she whispered, "Now I can sign for my baby's medicine." Tears fell freely, but her smile glowed like dawn. Maya smiled back, her hand steadying the woman's trembling fingers. It hit William then. This wasn't charity. It was power. The kind of power his millions had never given him the ability to restore dignity. But it wasn't only the lessons. Every night, once the chalkboard was wiped clean and notebooks tucked away, Maya reached into her nylon bag. Out came food she had carefully packed: loaves of bread, sachets of water, sometimes apples bruised but precious to the hungry. She distributed them without ceremony, starting with the oldest, then the mothers, then the men. "God bless you, Maya," they whispered, hugging her, clutching the bread as though it were gold. And William? He stood rooted to the sidewalk, his throat tight. Shame gnawed at him. In his penthouse, entire feasts went untouched. His refrigerator overflowed with delicacies flown in from Paris, meats aged in Italy, wines worth more than an average man's salary. He wasted more in a day than Maya had to live on in a month. And yet here she was giving away her own food to people who had even less. No cameras, no reporters, no applause, just quiet sacrifice. One evening, the sight overwhelmed him so much he retreated early. He drove back to his glass fortress overlooking Manhattan, yet felt like a trespasser in his own home. Every corner screamed of excess. The dining table that seated 12, though he ate alone. The gym with machines still wrapped in plastic. The closets lined with suits he hadn't worn in years. All of it mocked him, and for the first time in decades. William Carter sat in silence and asked himself, "What have I really built?" The next morning, his eyes tracked Maya differently. As she moved through the penthouse, polishing surfaces and folding linen, he noticed things he had been blind to: the frayed edges of her shoes, the faded fabric of her dress, the quiet hum she made under her breath while she worked. She never complained. She never asked. She never looked at him for pity. She carried herself with dignity and silence, while he carried nothing but arrogance and abundance. It rattled him. That night, he couldn't resist. When she passed through the front hall, tightening the straps on her two bags, William stepped forward from the shadows. "Maya," his voice startled her. She froze, clutching the bags close. "Yes, sir." His eyes fell to the worn straps, the bulging folders peeking out. "Where do you go every night?" Her throat bobbed. "It's personal, sir. I saw you," he admitted before he could stop himself. At the center, her eyes widened in panic. "I wasn't stealing," she said quickly, almost too quickly. Her voice shook with fear. "I swear I never took anything from this house." "I know," William interrupted, his tone softer than he expected of himself. "I never thought you did." She blinked at him, confused. Silence stretched. Finally, William said the words that had haunted him. "I don't understand. How can someone with so little give so much?" Her shoulders sank. She looked down at the floor, as though the answer were buried there. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, but heavy with memory. "My father couldn't read. When my mother got sick, he couldn't fill out the hospital forms. They turned him away because the paperwork wasn't right. By the time we got help," her voice cracked, but she pressed on. "She was gone. We buried her because of a delay, because of illiteracy." William felt his stomach knot. He had sat in countless hospitals for minor checkups, signing documents without a second thought. It had never occurred to him that someone's life could hinge on whether they could write a single word. Maya's eyes lifted, finally meeting his. They were steady, almost defiant. "That's why I do it. So no one else loses someone they love over a form they can't read." The silence that followed was deafening. William, who had built empires, who had bent governments with his money, who had crushed competitors with a glance, stood speechless before a maid with frayed shoes, an unshakable purpose. That night, William didn't follow her. He didn't need to. He already knew. But in the pit of his chest, a seed had been planted, and it was about to grow into something neither of them expected. The mansion was quieter than usual the next day. Even the clink of cutlery on porcelain seemed hushed, as though the walls themselves held their breath. William Carter sat at the edge of his dining table, untouched tea cooling beside him. His eyes weren't on the skyline, nor the morning paper spread across the oak surface. They were fixed on the kitchen door. When Maya finally stepped out with his tray, he did something he had never done before. "Sit," he said simply. She froze, unsure if she'd heard correctly. Her eyes darted to the tray, then to him. "Sir." "Sit," he repeated, softer this time, slowly, cautiously. Maya placed the tray down and perched at the far edge of the chair opposite him, hands folded tightly in her lap. She looked like a soldier waiting for a verdict. William's voice cut through the silence. "I followed you." The words struck like a stone dropped into still water. Maya's hands stiffened. Her eyes widened in alarm. "I saw the center," he continued. "I saw you teaching. I saw you handing out food. I saw everything." A long pause. Then, in a rush, she whispered, "I wasn't stealing. I swear I never touched." "I know," William interrupted gently. His tone surprised even him. "I never thought you did." Confusion flickered across her face. She blinked rapidly, unsure what to make of his calmness. Finally, she asked, "Then why? Why did you follow me?" William leaned forward, elbows resting on the table. "Because I couldn't understand how someone with so little could give so much." Her lips parted, but no words came. Her gaze dropped to the floor again, as though it was easier than facing his piercing stare. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled with memory. "My father was a proud man, but he couldn't read." She paused, swallowing hard. "When my mother fell sick, he couldn't fill out the hospital forms. The delay meant she wasn't treated quickly enough. We buried her because of that." The words hit William like a hammer. He had walked into countless hospitals in his life, signed countless papers without a second thought. To him, paperwork was nuisance. For Maya, it was tragedy. She continued, her voice gaining quiet strength. "That center is for people like him. For fathers who hide their shame because they can't read. For mothers who lose their babies because no one ever taught them to fill out a form. I don't want anyone else to suffer what we did." William sat back, shaken. He didn't have an answer. What could he say? That his empire of glass towers and marble lobbies meant anything against the weight of her story? He, who had built palaces of excess, had overlooked something as simple as teaching someone to read for the first time in decades. He felt small. That evening, he stood in the hallway, coffee mug in hand, watching the clock tick towards 6 p.m., but something was different. Maya wasn't rushing out the door with her bags. Instead, she lingered in the kitchen, humming softly as she mopped the floor. Her voice was low, almost like a lullaby. William leaned against the wall, listening. Something in that hum felt healing, like a balm on a wound he didn't know he carried. "You remembered?" she asked quietly, eyes wide. "I couldn't forget," he replied. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was thick, full of something neither dared name. Respect, maybe, or the beginning of something deeper. Days passed, and William's questions multiplied. He caught glimpses of her scribbling notes late at night, glasses slipping down her nose as she pored over books. One morning, he asked, "What are you working on?" Maya hesitated, then held up a thick file. "My diploma in adult education. I'm almost done." He opened it, scanning pages filled with interviews, diagrams, testimonies. One quote stopped him cold. "I used to walk past hospitals in pain because I couldn't fill a form. Now I walk in with my head high." William closed the file gently. "I've read proposals from top executives with half this truth," he murmured. Maya blushed faintly. "I'm only trying to tell their story." "No," he said firmly, eyes locked on hers. "You're telling our story. The story of all of us who forgot how to truly see people." She looked at him, stunned. And in that moment, William realized something he had never admitted to anyone: admiration. For the first time in years, he admired someone not for their power or wealth, but for their courage. That night, as the city roared outside, William lay awake. The image of Maya, chalk in hand, voice steady, heart unshakable, haunted him. He had discovered her secret. But what shook him most wasn't the secrecy itself. It was that he had lived this long without ever realizing the measure of greatness. Sitting quietly within his own walls, and deep inside, a question began to form. What if I could help her build something bigger? The storm broke on a Wednesday night. Rain hammered against the penthouse windows, thunder rolling across Manhattan like a restless drum. William Carter sat in his study, staring at a folder lying open on his desk. Inside were contracts, proposals, and financial projections, not for one of his hotels, but for something far different. The words scrawled across the top page read, "Expansion Plan, House of Second Chances." For days, he had been haunted by Maya's story, by the image of her chalk-stained hands guiding trembling fingers across paper, by her quiet strength as she fed strangers from her own bag. And now, for the first time in years, William Carter wanted to use his wealth for something beyond profit. When Maya stepped quietly into the study that evening with his tea tray, she froze. The folder was spread wide open, her name printed at the top of a page. "What is this?" she asked cautiously. William looked up, his voice steady. "It's a plan. For your center," her brow furrowed. "My center?" He leaned forward, intensity flashing in his eyes. "You've done incredible work with nothing. Imagine what you could do with resources. Real resources. Funding, buildings, teachers, volunteers. We could create 10 centers, no, 20 across the city. A network. No father would ever lose a wife because he couldn't fill a form. No child would go hungry because their mother couldn't sign for aid." Maya's lips parted, but she didn't speak. William pressed on. "You have the vision. I have the money. Together, we could change everything. You wouldn't have to carry this burden alone anymore." For a long moment, silence filled the room. Rain battered the glass, lightning lit the sky, and Maya just stood there, staring at him as if seeing a stranger. Finally, she whispered, "No." The word cut deeper than any business deal he had ever lost. William blinked, stunned. "No." Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was firm. "I can't accept this." "Why not?" His tone sharpened, more from shock than anger. "I'm offering you everything you need. You could build your dream faster, bigger, stronger. Why refuse?" Her gaze dropped to the floor. "Because if I say yes, it will no longer be mine." The air thickened between them. William sat back, disbelief tightening his chest. He had expected gratitude, relief, maybe even joy. Instead, she stood there, guarded, almost defiant. "All my life," she continued, her voice low but fierce, "people like me have been invisible. Our stories stolen. Our dreams claimed by someone richer, someone louder. I built that center stone by stone, bread by bread, lesson by lesson. It isn't just a project, it's my voice. And I'm afraid if I let you in, I'll lose myself in your shadow." Her words struck harder than any boardroom insult. For the first time in decades, William was speechless. He finally whispered, "You think I want to own it? To own you?" Maya met his eyes at last, hers steady, shining. "That's what people like you do, Mr. Carter. Even when you mean well, you swallow us whole." The rain outside roared louder, but it was nothing compared to the storm inside William's chest. No one had ever spoken to him this way. Not rivals, not partners, not even family. People either feared him or flattered him. But this young black maid, with worn-out shoes, had looked him dead in the eye and told him the truth, and for reasons he couldn't explain. He admired her all the more for it. He rose slowly from his chair, his voice softer now. "Then what do you want, Maya?" She drew in a shaky breath. "Time, space, to think, to pray, to breathe." William nodded once, though every instinct inside him screamed to argue, to push, to convince. Instead, he stepped back. "Then I'll wait." Maya turned and left the study, her footsteps fading down the hall. And William Carter, billionaire, hotel tycoon, untouchable, stood in the silence of his empire and realized something terrifying. This wasn't about money. It wasn't about buildings or networks or strategy. It was about trust. And trust, he knew, could not be bought. It had to be earned. That night, as the storm eased and the city lights blinked back to life, William sat alone, replaying her words. "If I say yes, it will no longer be mine." For the first time, the man who had always measured his life in numbers began to wonder. Maybe the greatest wealth wasn't in ownership at all. Maybe it was in letting someone else shine, even if it meant standing quietly in the shadows. The days after the storm felt different inside William Carter's penthouse. The marble floors gleamed as always, the chandeliers sparkled with artificial stars, and the city skyline stretched endlessly beyond the glass walls. Yet beneath the surface, something had shifted. Maya still moved quietly through the rooms, dusting shelves, scrubbing counters, arranging fresh flowers. She still wore the same faded clothes, still tied her hair back neatly, still slipped out every evening with her two nylon bags. But between her and William, something had changed. Gone were the long talks at the dining table. Gone was the tension-filled silence of discovery. Now there was only distance, polite and careful. She kept her head down. He kept his questions locked behind his lips. It was as if the rainstorm that night had washed a fragile bridge away. One Friday morning, the knock came at his study door, soft, hesitant. William looked up from a contract, frowning slightly. "Comin'." Maya entered, hands folded in front of her. In them, she clutched a white envelope. Her eyes didn't meet his. "I've come to give my notice," she said quietly. William froze. "Notice?" She nodded, extending the envelope. 2 weeks. I've been offered a part-time job at a school nearby. It will give me more time for the center." His chair scraped against the floor as he stood, surprise flashing across his face. "You're leaving?" "Yes, sir." Her voice trembled, but her resolve was clear. "Is this because of my offer?" His question came out more vulnerable than he intended. Maya shook her head gently. "No, it's because of what you made me believe I could do." William blinked. The words struck harder than rejection. She wasn't running from him. She was stepping into her purpose. "You changed how I saw myself, Mr. Carter," she continued softly. "For the first time, I started to dream out loud. And now, I need to protect that voice." He swallowed, the weight of her words sinking deep. "You don't have to go," he whispered. "I know." Their eyes met across the room, something unspoken pulsing between them. Not anger, not regret, something heavier. "I won't stop you," William said finally, his voice low. "But I'll miss you." Maya's lips curved into a faint, bittersweet smile. "I'll miss you too." The 2 weeks that followed were unlike any other. Maya still polished glass until it shone, still prepared his tea at exactly 7:30 a.m., still walked through the mansion as if she were a shadow. But now there was a new lightness to her steps, a certainty in her posture. It was as if she had already stepped into a future only she could see. And William, he watched her like a man memorizing the sun before sunset. Every hum of her song in the kitchen, every soft greeting in the hall, every clatter of her shoes against tile felt like a countdown he could not stop. On the final night before her last day, William found himself standing before her small servant's room at the end of the hall. He had never been there before. For a moment, he hesitated, then knocked softly. The door opened. Maya blinked in surprise, towel in hand. "I wanted to give you something," William said, his voice quieter than he ever used in boardrooms. He handed her a thick, sealed envelope. She looked down at it, confused. "What is this?" "Letters," he said. "From me, recommendations, funding notes, and one last message. Open it after you leave." Her hands trembled as she received it. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, she whispered, "Thank you." They didn't say goodbye. Neither of them could. Deep down, both knew this wasn't the end. It was only a pause. 2 weeks later, the mansion was quiet in a way William had never felt before. No soft hum from the kitchen, no rustle of a mop in the hall, no gentle voice offering him tea in the morning. Just silence. Heavy, unrelenting silence. He had grown used to her presence, to her shadow woven into the rhythm of his days. And now she was gone. Every night, he found himself staring out at the city, searching for something he couldn't name. For the first time in his life, the skyscrapers below didn't feel like monuments of victory. They felt like reminders of what he had lost. And then, one Thursday evening, a cream-colored envelope arrived, hand-delivered. No sender's name. William tore it open. Inside was a single card: House of Second Chances, special fundraiser and literacy night. "You are warmly invited." His breath caught. His chest tightened. He hadn't spoken to Maya since she left, though he had quietly sent anonymous donations, the grant letter, the laptop, supplies. She never knew they came from him. And yet, somehow, she had still invited him. William Carter sat in the silence of his penthouse, staring at the card. For the first time in years, the cold billionaire felt something warm break open in his chest. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far greater. The night of the fundraiser arrived draped in a quiet magic. For once, William Carter didn't wear a tailored tuxedo or arrive with a driver. Instead, he stepped out of a cab in a simple gray suit, no tie, no entourage. He wanted to walk into this place not as a billionaire, not as the untouchable tycoon of glass towers, but as a man. The neighborhood was alive with energy. Lanterns strung across the courtyard swayed in the evening breeze. Children ran with paper flowers, their laughter carrying into the night. The rusted gate William once saw was painted bright blue, and the faded sign now gleamed with fresh lettering: House of Second Chances. When he entered, The sight struck him like a wave. The hall was full. Mothers balancing babies on their hips, elderly men in pressed but worn shirts, children with notebooks clutched tight. Their faces shone with pride and anticipation. William slipped quietly to the back, his heart thundering in a way it never did during million-dollar deals. And then he saw her. Maya. She stood in the center, wearing a simple cream dress that flowed with her every movement. There were no jewels, no designer shoes, no spotlight, but her presence commanded the room. Her eyes swept across the crowd and then found him. A small smile bloomed on her lips, the kind that said, "You came." The program began. A little girl stepped up, her voice shaking as she read a poem, her first in English. The crowd erupted in applause. An elderly man took the microphone and shared how he had finally opened a bank account on his own. More cheers followed. Finally, the host stepped forward. "And now, we invite our founder, our light Miss Maya Johnson." The room roared. The walls trembled with claps and cheers as Maya walked to the front, microphone in hand. She glanced at William again, her gaze steady, before she began. "I used to think people like me only clean floors," she said, her voice carrying like a bell. "That our stories didn't matter, that our names didn't matter. But tonight, I see different. Because here, we've proven that even the smallest voices can rise. Even the forgotten can be seen." Her gaze found him once more, and her voice softened. "And to the man who saw me, even when I didn't see myself, thank you." William swallowed hard, his throat thick. For the first time in years, he clapped not as a businessman, not as a patron, but as a man whose heart had been moved. The event ended, but William stayed. He stood in the back, watching as Maya hugged students, laughed with mothers, and gathered empty cups with the same hands that once scrubbed his penthouse sinks. Yet now she moved differently, like a leader, not a servant, like a woman who finally knew who she was. Eventually, she walked over. "You didn't have to come," she said softly, smiling. "I had to," he replied. "You invited me." Her eyes searched his face. "Was it you?" He didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Yes, the donation. The laptop, the letters. It was me." Maya didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She simply nodded, as though she already knew. "I didn't want you to feel bought." William added quickly, "I wanted you to feel free. You gave me more than money," she said gently. "You gave me a mirror. You helped me see what I was capable of." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket. "I'd like to give you something else." He handed her a rolled certificate. Her hands trembled as she unrolled it, and her breath caught. "Partnership agreement, House of Second Chances. Co-founder, Maya Johnson. Program director, Maya Johnson. Full voting rights, board seat, equal leadership." She looked up, stunned. William's voice was steady. "I want to expand this all across the country with your heart and my resources. This isn't charity. This is purpose, and I want to walk beside you." Her lips trembled. "Are you sure?" He smiled softly. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. And Maya." He paused, his voice dropping. "I'd also like to take you to dinner. Not as your boss, not as your partner, but as a man who sees you." For the first time, tears slid down her cheeks. "I'd like that," she whispered. Weeks later, the newly renovated center unveiled its sign. Bright, bold letters stretched across the board, "The Maya Johnson Literacy Center," where every name matters. Beneath it, smaller letters read, "Co-founded by William Carter and Maya Johnson. Changing lives, one voice at a time." The crowd cheered. Children waved banners. Elders wiped tears. And under the golden sky, William and Maya stood hand in hand. She leaned close, whispering, "I used to think people like me only served food." William turned, smiling. "Now people like you serve a nation, together." They walked back inside, not as maid and master, but as equals bound by purpose, by trust, and by a quiet love that grew not from wealth, but from seeing. The story that began with suspicion ended with partnership, with dignity restored, with a reminder that greatness isn't measured by riches or status, but by the kindness we choose and the sacrifices we make. And somewhere in the heart of New York, the House of Second Chances stood tall, not as a charity project, but as a revolution.